Before we start creating our first animation, let's take a few minutes to go through the animation settings in 3ds Max. As we said earlier, you will find all this by clicking on the time configuration button. Right here at the bottom of your interface. These settings are grouped into 4 main sections: frame rate, time display, playback, and animation. First, let's quickly talk about what a frame actually is. A frame is basically a single rendered image. When you play frames one after another, you get the illusion of motion, and that's animation. The smoothness of an animation is measured in frames per second, or FPS. So if you are animating at 30 FPS, that means you need 30 frames for every second of animation. So to create a 5-second animation, you will need 150 frames. So you need 150 renders. Now, let's look at the frame rate section in the time configuration window. This is where you choose how many frames per second your animation will play. NTSC is common for TV and video in North America and Japan. Technically, it's 29.95 FPS for broadcast compatibility. PAL is used across most Europe, parts of Asia and Australia. Film is the classic cinematic standard. Or you can pick custom and set any FPS you like. For most architectural animations, 30 FPS is a solid choice. It's smooth, it looks great on digital platforms, and it's pretty much universally accepted. Next is time display, which controls how the timeline is shown. You can pick from frames, which displays the timeline in simple frame numbers. For example, if your animation runs at 30 FPS, frame 90 corresponds to 3 seconds. This is the most commonly used option for animators. SMPTE displays time at hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. This format is ideal for video work or broadcast productions. Frame and ticks displays the timeline as a combination of frames and ticks, where ticks are subframe units for finer control. This is useful for precise adjustments in complex animations. And finally, MMSS and ticks shows time in minutes, seconds, and ticks. Ticks here represent subdivisions of a second, allowing detailed timing adjustments. This format is helpful for syncing animations to audio or other timed elements. For most animation work, sticking with frames keeps things simple. Then there is the playback section, which controls how your animation plays in the viewport. Some key options here are real time, which makes sure your animation plays at your set frame rate, even if it means dropping frames on heavy scenes. Active viewport only limits playback to just the active viewport. This is super handy to save processing power. Loop, so when your animation reaches the end, it starts over again. In speed, these options allow you to adjust the speed of the animation from a quarter of the normal speed to 4 times faster. Here, you can set the direction to forward, reverse, or ping pong. Ping pong is used for testing things like sliding doors or back and forth motions. Finally, there is the animation section, which controls the length and structure of your animation. Start time sets which frame your animation begins on. End time sets where it ends. Length is just the total duration in frames. Frame count shows how many frames are actually in the timeline. Current time shows where your time slider is, and you can type a frame number here to jump to it. And rescale time lets you stretch or shrink the timing of your whole animation without changing the structure. So if you double your frame length, the animation slows down proportionally. If you want to create a 5-second animation at 30 frames per second, to determine how many frames are needed, you multiply the duration in seconds by the frame rate. So 5 seconds multiplied by 30 fps equals to 150 frames. This means you need to set your animation length to 150 frames in the time configuration window. If you have 100 frames in your timeline and you want to know how long that is at 30 fps, divide the total frames by the frame rate. So 100 frames divided by 30 fps equals to 3.33 seconds. This tells you the animation would last 3.33 seconds. By adjusting these settings, you can control the timing and length of your animations effectively. Now that you understand the animation settings, you are ready to start keyframing.